Or if you want, as an alternative, you can actually go to this little button up here, which has got like a little device with the shape of a half an Android on it. So you can go to either of those two. I'm going to be the manager. And what you want to do is you want to actually add in one device. I currently have two actual devices in here. I think one of them doesn't work and the other one does work. I'm actually going to go ahead and make one new one. So we actually get a sense of how do we create ones? So in here, if you don't have any Android visual devices, which you probably don't, but let's go ahead in here and press this little plus square and create new virtual device, and we have to do a few things in here. The first thing you want to do is you want to actually choose what kind of device you want to emulate. Time for the most for these devices. They either use a similar size, which is usually 10, 18 by 19, 20, or they use a size that is actually proportional to that. So for the most part, they can get away with using the same device for almost all of your tests. In my experience, I have found Pixel 2 to be one of the better, but they're testing visual devices. So if you want to just follow along with me, you can use that one. So you choose the device that you like to choose for a test. Let's say Pixel 2. I'm going to head next. And then the next thing you have to do is you actually have to decide which version of Android you want to try on that device. And this is where things are becoming a little bit more tricky and become more important. So in here, you have to actually choose the same API level that we decided earlier on, even though this isn't a necessity. But I feel like it's a good idea that we do everything on the same level of the API. This way we will minimize the level of confusion of the things that might happen. So I'm going to choose Oreo version 27. If you don't have it, you actually have to go ahead and say the download. If you press the download for any of these things is actually going to give you a little message and it's going to take a little while before it can actually download that one. So, yeah, I'm actually going to go ahead and had to download it and is going to tell me if I'm okay with the license agreement and everything. And I had accepted next I was going to take a little while before it can download the whole thing. Usually the API levels are something about the gigabyte. This one is like 875 megabytes. So once you're done with the download, you will end up seeing this here that the ones that they all downloaded, there is no more download button in front of them and they actually have a slightly darker color. And once you are there, you can continue with this video. I'm not going to actually wait for the download simply because I don't want to keep you guys in here. You can possibly doing here once you're done with the download go ahead and hit next. And the last thing you have to do is you just have to give it a name. So I'm actually going to go ahead and call this one API 20. The reason I'm calling it, if I show you once again, is that because we are using one of the recommended system images, which is using Google Play services. And this is quite important later on in the course when you want to use the Google Play services such as connecting to Firebase or connecting to various APIs, we need to have one of the system images that they have Google Play enabled and all the recommended ones. They actually do that. So we don't really need to develop anything using the x86 or the older images. We kind of stick to the recommended ones. So here I'm actually going to go ahead and call it API27g.p, and I think that's about it. And then you have to finish and not take a little while and is going to create a new virtual device in here for you. Now, the moment you have the virtual device in here, it means you can actually use it to run our application. And to do that, here's what we're going to like, this little drop-down menu on the top, that is the one next to the Run button. And you're going to choose the correct one that you want to write. If you have a device connected to your machine, you might see that one. And if you have other visual devices, you might see them. The one I'm interested in is this one API 27. So I'm going to select that one and then I'm going to hit the Run and Compile a button that is next to it when I press that. A little while, let me actually hype this one, and it's going to boot up this one for us, which is an Android emulator, and this Android emulator, we are actually going to see our application depending on whether this is the first time we are loading it before it might take a little while. You have to be a little bit patient with it. Usually it shouldn't be more than about a minute. Again, it really depends on the type of device that you have and the type of computer and the processor you have, but you really shouldn't take a very long time. So now my application is actually loaded in here, and again, we don't really expect to see a lot because we haven't really done anything on our application, or application is just showing us a text head award. But it shows us is working in the simulator. Everything is set up properly. There is a right connection between our Android Studio with our emulator. So that's what we were expecting to see. Everything is working and now we are ready to move on to our next lesson. We'll come back in, this doesn't talk about the emulators, these are a piece of software that help us see our applications on our computers, hence the term emulators. I didn't into the studio. So what do you want to do? Is this you want to go ahead and say you start a new studio project, and once you start there, some of the things that I tell you these earliest stages is that I want to just kind of follow me without really wondering what they exactly do, because there are some of the areas that we need to come back to them later on. But for now, because I want to get some results quickly and we want to build some confidence, I want to just follow me along. So here what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and say phone and tablet empathy project or EMT activity project. And in here you want to go ahead and put it in a certain folder and you want to choose the language to be Kotlin. So these early settings for our application are quite important. But the good news is that the only way to do this just once, and then from that point on, for the most part, they're going to stay intact. Let me talk to you a little bit about what they are. The first thing I've been here is the name of your application. Let's say I want to call this one application my emulator application. It doesn't matter what you call it, but for now, I'm just going to give it the name that I know what it is. The second thing is the package name, and this package name is actually quite important simply because you want to offer the name that becomes quite unique. A very common practice in the industry is offering it the reverse of the name of your website. So you might use the name of my website is artinstitute.com. So the reverse of it becomes com, that are the institute. So if the name of your company is, for instance, example.com, what you do is you just go ahead and say com that example and then automatically boundaryless to your concatenated the name of your application at the end of it. The reason this is an important practice is simply because when so many different developers, they upload their applications to the on the replay market, they all want to have different names and we want to have them as unique names, so no one other than me is going to have this particular domain. And because of that, this name is absolutely unique. And then my application, I'm going to make sure that I don't have another application with this name in my basically repository. So this is a way of making sure that your names are basically unique. Then you have the same location that you can actually find the space for it. In my case, I'm actually going to put it in here in my users Amir desktop, this particular folder. You want to choose the language to be content because that's what we use in the older days, not the older. But just up until about 2 years ago, we used to do a lot of Java programming. These days we do a lot of content. And lastly, the very important thing in here is using a minimum SDK. This is something that we're going to talk about in more details in the future. What this basically means of what API of the various APIs around with. Are we targeting the higher that you go, you get more features, you get features that are very unique to Android version 10 or 11, so on and so forth. But obviously, the higher you go, you limit the number of the devices that you can target. For instance, with version 27, we can actually get about 53% of all the devices. This is a kind of an approximate, but you can kind of trust it. If you go to say it, version 30, you would get less than 1% because not many devices are using this version. If you go to something much lower, let's say 24, because about 73% of the applications. So something that I said as a rule of thumb for the rest of this course is that for almost everything, we stick to version 27. And there are a few reasons for that. You will see when we get to them. There are a few libraries that we use that they only work with version 27. I feel like an ARIA 27 is kind of giving us what we need in terms of the functionality and also giving us a good number of the more recent devices, 63.5%, even though you might feel that you are not getting 50% of all the devices. It also means that almost any device that has shown up in the past 3 or 4 years, you can get access to them, which is really a great thing for any application that you want to develop. So we had that. We say these are settings and we're going to say finished and we're going to build our project. And then the studio is basically going to open up with our new application. So the moment the of this video opens up, you can actually get rid of this tip of the day and then no maximizer in here. You really don't need to worry about any of the things that we're seeing here right now. We're going to talk about all of these details. We're going to learn what do they do? The one thing we want to learn right now is how can we actually show this application on actual device or an emulator. How can we see what this application does? Obviously, we can't expect this application to do a lot for us right now, but even if it's just an empty application, we should be able to see it somewhere, and that is where Android, which device basically comes into play. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to Tools Android Virtual Device Manager.